the meeting to order? Almost? Okay, she's unmuting. I'm Gina Mastricazza, I'm the vice chair. I'm going to run tonight's meeting. So there's your official call to order. And the first item is the agenda review. Are there any issues or concerns, or would somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll motion to approve.
I have something.
Yes,
So
Amy?
all through this it says co-chair. I thought you were vice chair.
I'm actually vice chair, so
It's not that important.
you're correct.
Yeah.
I am totally the vice chair. I'm delighted to be the vice chair, not the co-chair. So we'll make that agenda amendment.
I looked at past ones, it said co-chair also, so I couldn't find where we elected, but I thought it was
I'm
vice
totally
chair.
not elected. I'm delighted to be the vice chair.
Y'all wrote a good report, so
Why, thank you. But I'll take it. Are there any comments or concerns about the agenda as presented, other than the title that I am delighted to keep at vice chair? Okay, seeing none, we've had a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll move approval of the agenda as amended. We have the minutes from March 23rd, and I'm pleased to report that our state attorney, Brian Kramer, is in the house, and he may have a few suggestions or comments related to or responses related to our minutes. Is there a motion or any comments from our fantastic state attorney? Oh, this gives you a good reason to be here, so welcome.
Well, thank you. I didn't have any comments. I just was offering to say that if there are questions, because when I looked through the minutes, it looked like you guys had a lot of questions about our pre-arrest diversion program.
I do.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about that program.
So Ms. Payne, go ahead and ask him any questions, and then we can modify the minutes.
Recording in progress.
I would like to set up a meeting with you anyway.
All right, no problem.
So I don't know if it's just unfamiliar language to me, but the questions I had to do with the people that I'm in contact with feel like it's white people, like you have males, white males, who are offered that. And I've looked through, all the different statutes, and it seems like, I know there's some that can't be pre-release. So I'm just wondering how y'all make the decision.
Sure.
At one point, we were told that the police officer is the first one who can recommend that.
So that's a very good question. So here's how it works. The first thing that has to happen for someone to enter pre-arrest diversion is that law enforcement has to make a decision not to arrest the person. That's key. Once they've arrested the person, they're not eligible because it's a pre-arrest diversion program, the purpose of which is to prevent the case from appearing in the criminal justice system. So that's step number one. After that step is accomplished, every case that is not domestic violence or criminal traffic infractions is reviewed by a prosecutor in my office by the name of Ashley Chen. So that's every non-arrest misdemeanor goes through Ashley Chen. And she reviews it for the criteria that we have set out in our written policy and whether or not it meets that specific criteria. If it meets the criteria, then if it's a victim crime, for instance, one of the criteria is the victim has to approve. So she'll call the victim and say, are you okay with this person being in pre-arrest diversion? Explain the program to them. They say yes, that condition's met. So if they meet the criteria, then the person will get a letter, essentially, from us. We will email, we will call, we will send them a letter, we'll do anything we can to reach out to them. We get the information from the law enforcement officers that tell us how to get in touch with the person. We get in touch with them and then we say, hey, come on down to the office. We have a meeting where the public defender is present, court services are present, the student legal services from the University of Florida are present, and that we explain the program to them, offer it to them, give them the opportunity to meet with those folks, to make the decision whether to accept the program and participate in it. And if they do, they're in the program. And if they don't, we simply send their case on to regular court. Every case is screened for legal and factual sufficiency, so if the case is not legally sufficient or the case is not factually sufficient, it will not be sent to the program, it will just be dismissed. We never offer someone diversion who we wouldn't intend to prosecute if they didn't accept it.
So statute 907, are you saying you only do misdemeanors, or do you follow statute 907 who you have to arrest?
We don't arrest anyone.
Right, so my goal of getting on this board and a group I work with that's looking at court services is to keep people from getting arrested. So you don't really, you can make
So
a decision. So we need to get the police to arrest fewer people.
What we do is we encourage law enforcement, which is all we can do, because I do not control the police department or the sheriff's office or any of the other 40 law enforcement agencies that submit cases to my office. I have no control over them. But what we do is we talk to them, we communicate with them, and I communicate with the chief very frequently, and we encourage them, when it is possible, to not make an arrest. That is a law enforcement decision that has to be made on the street by officers, and there are factors that go into that are far beyond a lawyer's understanding of what happens in a street environment. They get to make that decision. We encourage them to not arrest if they don't have to, because when you arrest, you limit the state attorney's options on what we can do with that case going forward. Okay? But ultimately, the decision, and almost every agency is highly cooperative in this regard, and GPD is our #1 client, and we are a service-based organization, and they are our most cooperative agency of all of the agencies that we deal with. Some of them are much more conservative in their, I represent 6 counties, so I represent Union, Baker, Levy, Gilchrist, Alachua, Bradford County. Some of them are very conservative. Their officers tend to make more arrests. Our most cooperative agency is the Gainesville Police Department.
I would like to set up, if possible, with
Always,
the
of
group
course.
that part of it is, we have not been able to get statistics about, and it's because the sheriff's department is not cooperative, but how many people are in jail right now because they didn't get the phone call, they had to meet with someone and stuff like that. So I have specific questions, if I could try
Sure.
to set up a meeting.
Perfectly fine. I'm happy to meet with you, and I would also tell you that we regularly provide a set of statistics that were pre-programmed into our computer system, because we're a completely electronic case management system that breaks out all of the data as far as the number of cases that were submitted, how many of them were arrests, how many of them were offered diversion, how many accepted, how many completed. Down the line, there's more statistics than that. But we keep those running, and we produce them at real time at no cost to anybody who asks for them. We provide them regularly to the police department when they ask for them. So all those type of statistics are readily available. Your question is somewhat more complicated. How many people have been offered the program, did not accept it, and as a result of their failure to accept the program, ended up in the Alachua County Jail? That would be an intensive statistical analysis that would require a case-by-case analysis that would be extraordinarily expensive. But if you have an organization that's willing to pay for that expense, then we might be able to work with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So,
Any other
Mr.
questions?
Kramer, I would recommend, if Ms. Payne is willing to meet with you and you all can discuss your concerns, I would personally like to see the criteria resent to this board, and if you wouldn't mind just sending it to one of GPD folks.
I can send it to Deborah, because
Yeah, that'd be
I'm
perfect.
guessing that she already has gotten it several
I
times.
think so
but
too,
we
but
can
that's
definitely
about
send it to
it.
you.
But I think it's great that Ms. Payne wants to ask you specific questions.
I have everything we've gotten.
Okay?
I don't know if I have a dense head. I do have a hard time understanding the difference. I would like to talk to you in person about statute 907 and how much
Sure.
you follow that.
Is there any other
Well, I
question I
think
can
that's
answer for
great.
anyone else?
And let us know if there are areas of concern. Mr. Cohen?
Yes,
First, thanks for coming. You're the first time I've been on this for 10 years. I think
I've only been the state attorney for one. I probably should have been here earlier.
but you're the first state attorney to show up. That, for us,
Well,
that's good.
I'm trying to become
Your
educated about what you
predecessor,
do.
I meet him at other functions. Very good man, I might add, but You're the first one to come to ours, so I feel it's quite honored that you came here.
Well, thank you, sir.
You could have been a dinner. What about, I forgot the technical term, purging the record? Youths get arrested, they get, one youth I mentor, I know, for example, a minority kid got caught selling a small bag of weed in the school zone, such that, so ended up with a felony. And I heard there was some move afoot to make it a little easier to purge the records for minors. What's going on that way?
I don't think it passed. There was a bill that was put up by Senator Keith Perry that would have essentially caused an automatic expungement of juvenile records.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that the timeframes were not, as far as I understood it, is, so for instance, if it automatically expunged, the department still has a responsibility to the court to provide the juvenile's record if a juvenile gets a subsequent offense, right? So there were some mechanical problems as far as how you would comply with the Department of Juvenile Justice's requirement that they advise the court of the juvenile's prior record and also have these automatic expungements occurring. Those things were kind of in conflict, and you know how legislatures work.
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't ultimately get worked out, they ultimately just fall off.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's more or less what happened
Okay,
with that bill.
thanks, that's what I was.
But it comes up. It'll probably be brought back up next legislative session. They'll work on it, and it'll come back up.
For a kid with a nonviolent, relatively minor offense, nevertheless, to have that on his shoulders the rest of his life, because it's difficult.
And they don't. I mean, juvenile records are subject to far less disclosure than an adult criminal record. But I don't disagree with you in any respect, because we're working hard to prevent adult criminal records from, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we're with you on that, in that regard.
Thank you very much, sir.
Anything else, ma'am?
So, Mr. Kramer, I think what you've heard today is there's interest in sort of, these are the topics of interest, but I think I would go back to our minutes and say, while there are still questions for our individual members to follow up with you, I think you're set free on the minutes.
I'm here if you have any further questions, I'll just sit back down.
We'll be delighted to ask you a lot of questions, so.
Call me back up.
Oh, we will. So is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hi, Ms. Evelyn, good to see you. So we have next our chief's update. So Acting Chief Lonnie Scott, you got all kinds of good things going on here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, respectful PAC members. It's my privilege to, first of all, want to recognize the goodness of one of your members and ask that Mr. Fareed Johnson come up front.
We're going to embarrass you. Come on up.
So this is
Good for
a
you,
certificate of appreciation for all of what you've done on this PAC, and really appreciate your leadership and everything that you've done, the smile that you have consistently for us and get us in and out of meetings. We really appreciate that and the feedback you give us on how we can improve. So thank you for it. And this certificate reads as follows. Certificate of appreciation presented to Fareed Johnson in appreciation of dedicated exemplary service and support to the Gainesville Police Department and the City of Gainesville with his valuable contribution as the chairperson of the Gainesville Police Department's Police Advisory Council. Given on the 23rd day of March, we had it for you last month. And this is presented on behalf of Ms. Curry, the city manager, and myself. So thank you.
Congratulations.
We also have a coffee mug for those late nights.
You better drink out of that, man.
Hey, I'm gonna need this too. I'm burning the midnight oil tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you, Fareed, and don't you worry, we'll call you back into service. Don't you worry. You can never escape us.
Okay,
So, yes, so the next thing is the monthly arrest update and NIVRS report.
yeah, and what I have for you are the arrest statistics, and Yeah, in the future, I'd like to discuss, maybe bring you some additional information. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of outreach that we do. We're going to be presenting some of that to the city commission, and we think that it's important to see that it's not all about arrest, that we actually do some other things to try to prevent crime and intercede before people commit these crimes. So the first chart I have is the adult arrest and felony/misdemeanor. As you can see, there's a demographic breakdown on this. The number of felony arrests, you have more black males that have been arrested for felonies than any other category, any other component that we're tracking. That's followed by white males, and then black females and white females. When you look at the misdemeanor section, you see, I guess, a little more. It's a little more in sync as far as the number of black males being 26 and the number of white males being 25. Black females are 14 and white females are 4. And the next section gives a breakdown on what those were. You listen to the top 10 offenses. You can see that number one amongst all of those is trespass after warning. So these are folks that have been issued a trespass, and then they were subsequently arrested or cited. And it says arrest, but that arrest could actually be notice to appear, or it could be something that's, I think these are the physical arrests, right? The physical arrests in this case. The next two categories, you have possession of controlled substance, felony amount. You have 16 total, 12 of those were African Americans. The African American males and 3 were white males. There were no black females arrested in that category and 1 white female. The next category would be a simple battery, domestic battery situations. 6 black females, higher than any other category. You know, you'll see black males are 3, white females are 1, and white males are 5. That's a total of 15 overall. Those top 3 make up the bulk of our arrests in these areas. I think the next highest is the simple battery, and that's 7, and then followed by lesser crimes or lesser numbers. But again, I think it's noteworthy that in this category that we've had, and we have noted that we're seeing females be a little more involved in batteries and fights. You know, I don't know if that's a sign of the times, or you know, you see a lot of this stuff on social media, and I think some of them like showing this stuff on social media, so they get into a fight and post it on social media, and the wisdom to that kind of defies my logic. I don't understand it, but I know that occurs. Next is the sworn complaints and adults, the felony misdemeanor. Again, number 1 leading that category is black males, and followed by white males. This category is not that we have physically arrested anyone. This is when we are unable to either locate them, or we choose to, instead of making a physical arrest, file the charges through the state attorney's office who evaluates the probable cause.
Okay, perfect. So, Mr. Blunt, question?
Yeah, is it okay to ask questions along
Yep.
the way
Well,
by category?
related to this chart, yes.
Because this relates to the first category, back to the arrests. The first category, trespass after warning, do you know if there are many in that category that were homeless people, that were just in spaces they weren't supposed to be?
I don't know. I don't have specifics on that, but I can get that information for you.
Yeah.
You know, typically, we avoid making arrests for trespass after warning unless it's problematic, or unless the owner of the property kind of insists that we take that approach. Many of these could be people that are homeless, but we don't make a habit, quite frankly. We'd rather give them the warning and let them move on. In fact, the way that we deal with homeless issues is that we don't make the first contact typically. We contact the Grace Center, and they send out a group of folks to try to facilitate those folks moving on. So if they're at a certain location and we need to try to get them to leave that location, we contact Grace. Grace sends out their team. That team comes out, talks with them, tries to encourage them to either come to Grace or arrange some other housing for them. And if that doesn't work, then we get in contact with them. But we are not the first contact for most trespass incidents involving homeless.
Okay, thank you. That's actually good to know. Thank you.
We were talking about the sworn complaints. Again, these are not physical arrests, but they are charges that are affidavits that are prepared and forwarded to the state attorney's office. As you can see, the number one category for that is grand theft, and that's $750 up to $5,000 or $4,999. That's followed by simple battery that has 8 charges, and you notice a little more parity in the simple battery charges there. It's followed by simple battery domestic, and in this category we have 7. However, 6 of those are black males that are perpetrating those particular crimes. Followed by retail theft. Retail theft, a total of 5 arrests or sworn complaints completed. And again, that may be a situation more than likely where we respond to a store, we get the information, and we cite the people and let them go. And give them either do the sworn complaint and let them go, or we get the information of who they are and file those charges later. The next slide is the Gainesville pre-arrest adult misdemeanor. As you can see here, we have white female has 5, white male 4, black male 2, and black female 1. You know, and these are situations that we refer to the program that we discussed earlier, a part of that program, where these folks won't have a record if they adhere to the requirements that are placed upon them that they agree to. And we're monitoring this in particular because we want to make sure that we don't really have a disparity that really kind of sticks out. It ought to be offered, quite frankly, quite evenly, so we're monitoring this just to make sure that we maintain the equity in that situation. When you look at the situations that we use to pre-arrest, you see that alcohol beverage possession under 21, and 4 of those were white females, and 1 black male, 2 white males. And then the next closest category is 3 total incidents, and that's for petty theft, and a white female and 2 white males.
We have a question on this, Mr. Johnson.
Is there, this may have been asked and addressed before, is there a tracking system for whether or not a person was offered the program, and if they were and they were denied, why they were denied?
No, it's still the discretion of the officer as to whether or not they offer it. And what we do is encourage the officers to use that tool. It's easier for the officers to use it because then they don't have to, quite frankly, go through the trouble of completing the paperwork to arrest someone and take them all the way out to the jail and that whole deal. So if you can apply, this is typically like a downtown or midtown situation where somebody's underage and they're drinking, and you know, you sit down and you work out something. You look at the offenses that here, you know, you have alcohol, petty theft, you have an aggravated battery, which I don't know how that's a misdemeanor, but false alarms, those are type things that we're dealing with as far as the pre-arrest situation. We are mandated by certain state laws as far as domestic violence type calls and things along those lines that our options are very limited.
For the equity of the program, is there any way that something could be implemented to know whether or not if officers are in fact
What we're doing, this right here, quite frankly, is our monitoring of it. We keep that data, and then we look at it, and then we have a program coordinator who will come to us and say, this looks out of sync, you know, or I noticed that this officer continually does this, and so it's up to the supervisors and that program coordinator to help make sure that we're monitoring those activities and keeping it in line. And really, the buck stops here.
Mr. Johnson, your questions, or you all good? Okay, Mr. Blunt?
But it's really a follow-on to, for Reed's question. Is there a point in the reporting, like, could you go back right now and look for something written by the officer about why in a particular instance they did or did not offer it in the rationale? Do they ever have to put that down, or it's just done in the moment and it's gone, and just?
No, not that I'm aware of. You know, if an officer has a propensity for continuing to do it and not using it, then the supervision is going to ask why not. And we have our weekly meeting where I sit down with the captains and we emphasize to them to make sure that the officers use their full toolbox. And that toolbox, this is one of the tools in that toolbox, that they utilize that along with some of the other things that they have outlined in their toolbox. Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Blunt?
That's it.
Okay, Mr. Johnson?
To follow up on his question, the police bill of rights, this wouldn't actually be a punishable offense, all right, in internal affairs, not offering. So there's no repercussions for an officer that doesn't actually
No,
offer
but
the
there
program.
are repercussions if we find out that you're not being consistent. We use the 3 C's: compassionate, consistent, and constitutional. So as a minority myself, if I note that I have officers that are being disparate in the way that they issue these citations, and it's going to be something that we take up. But we're monitoring it, and typically, you know, you have to look at the offenses that are qualified for it, and then the location. And you look at what we're arresting. When you look at the number of arrests, what are people being arrested for? The trespass, but you have it's more violent crimes. The violent crimes are the ones that, you know, as far as what we do, there's not a whole lot of pre-arrests for violent crimes. You know, the diversion programs that get implemented, but you know, violent crimes, we don't typically enact the pact for that, the GPA.
Is there any questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Scott?
The notice to appear, you know, you see there that that was issued to one white male and one white female, 2 white males. We don't normally issue a whole lot of notice to appears now. You know, we kind of we're steering away from that. Again, the notice to appear, basically you sign a citation promising to appear in court for a violation. We substitute the GPA and use that more, so you note that there's more GPA used as opposed to notice to appears.
GPA?
That's the pre-arrest, gainful pre-arrest. Okay.
That's great language.
The juvenile arrest, you know, again, a troubling area for us is the number of juveniles that are arrested. We have, although we've had a disproportionate minority contact in place for several years, you know, we're still concerned about the number of minorities that are arrested. But the unfortunate fact is that there are a larger number of minorities that are committing some of these crimes, particularly the violent crimes, and that's the emphasis that we have to place on our prevention activities. So you see here on the juvenile arrest, felony, there were 7 black males and 3 black females. And then in the misdemeanor, you had 1 black female and 1 white male. Again, those numbers for juveniles are relatively small, but you have to look at the uptick that you experienced in the holidays and really go to summer. The breakdown as far as that goes shows that on the next page that it's grand theft is the number 1, followed by domestic battery and robbery, as well as grand theft. So those are the grand theft auto and the grand theft firearm. That's a serious consideration for us. No matter how many times we say it, I would say probably somewhere about 38%, maybe 40% of the stolen guns are stolen out of cars. You know, and it's just not, that's not, and it depends on the month. I mean, I think it might go down as low as 30%, but that's just not a good read, and you have to realize that the juveniles today, when they pick up these guns, they know no limitations. You know, they will use them. They will use them, and good thing they're not really good shots because they shoot quite a bit, and we're blessed that not a lot of people are hit. You know, we've been blessed this year so far, only one homicide, but that one homicide was too many. So we're looking at what can we do to try to, and that's why we reach out to other organizations like the One Community Group that we're working with to try to come up with ways to address and prevent that death from ever occurring.
Chief, what percentage of the felony crimes are gang-related?
I don't have the statistic right offhand, but a lot of this, you know, and a lot of what we call gangs are more territorial type things where you have groups of youth that become members of a street gang, so to speak. And then I think if I was going to take a wild guess at it, I would say, well, I put really the big message for this is that narcotics is one of the primary contributors to violent crime. Either someone trying to take someone's narcotics, someone selling a deal going bad, someone out there trying to rob a person that's selling it. That's probably the most common factor. And then I would say, if I was going to take a wild guess, I would say 25 to 30% maybe, but that's strictly a wild guess. I can get those numbers for you and bring them back and give them to you in the next meeting if you
Well, I
like.
think you answered with the territorial issue.
Yeah.
And is, if I could follow up, I thought I'd read in the paper that the Joint Drug Task Force was disbanded.
Yes, we had a Alachua County Joint Task Force, and he left. We formulated a new task force with the 8th Judicial Circuit with the State Attorney's Office. We are limited typically by our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So if we have people that are selling narcotics and they go right outside the city limits, we have very little that we can do to them. Narcotics knows no bounds, so they don't respect jurisdiction. So we work with the State Attorney's Office to formulate a task force that would concentrate on Gainesville, but they have powers, they have special investigation powers throughout the 8th Judicial Circuit, which is several counties. But our primary interest and emphasis is on what's occurring in Gainesville, in and around Gainesville. And, you know, we have that capability now to go to where the problems are and try to eliminate the influx of narcotics. And we also work on the interstate to try to deal with that as well.
And is the DEA part of this?
Yes, it's DEA, ATF, FDLE, GPD, UPD. The State Attorney's Office has investigators on it. It's really almost every FBI is there for assistance. Almost every entity that law enforcement entity that we deal with, we have in this county, is there. Almost every one. State, local, and the federal are part of this 8th Judicial Circuit. They help us out as far as, you know, trying to get things taken care of. We have the HIDA that we continue to operate, and that allows us to do some things on the interstate and try to take some of those narcotics off that are traveling through our city. I-75 has a tremendous amount of illegal activity, be it human trafficking or be it narcotics trafficking that occurs up and down that roadway. So we're trying to be proactive and deal with that as efficiently as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next slide, I think, deals with the sworn complaints, felony misdemeanors. I thought I covered that one already. Am I going backwards?
No, you
Okay.
just, you were just on that
That's
slide.
juvenile, for juveniles. And you'll
Juvenile
see
sworn complaints.
that with juvenile sworn complaints that we have 4 black females, and 1 black male. And then you have, for misdemeanors, 7 black females, 1 black male, and 3 white females. When you look at the breakdown, you'll see that number 1 is domestic battery. You know, that's the number 1 charge for them, and 2 black females and 1 white male were charged in that. Followed by simple battery. Again, these are crimes of violence. You see another 2 in those categories. And misdemeanors follows that, and petty theft, which are more property crimes. Everything else is down to number 1. The next slide pertains to civil citations, juvenile civil citations. You see that we had 2 to black males and 1 to a white male. When you look at the offenses that were covered, possession of controlled substance, so that's narcotics, more than likely marijuana. The other is a petty theft, and that's what the white male was arrested for, cited for. The last thing I have for you is just a quick review of our NIBRS report. This gives you some idea of how we're doing comparatively with previous years. You can see the 3-year average and the percentage change from 21 to 22. I'll be covering the percentage change. You'll see that for violent crime, when you compare where we are today in 22 with where we were in 21, we're down 1.76% for violent crime. When you look at property crime, you'll see that we're down a total of 12.36%. And you note that overall, when you combine this, a total decrease in the crime of 10.48%. The area that I like to concentrate on, and it's more of an issue for me, is the violent crime. I like to see our decrease be better than that. That's something that we have tried our best to influence, but with the proliferation of guns on the streets, in the hands of people illegally, young people in particular, it's not just something that we're experiencing here, it's a nationwide epidemic, and you see that we're constantly having shootings that occur all over the country. So we're keenly aware of it, and again, we solicit your help and really the community as a whole, because it's not a police problem, it's a community problem. And we need to try to address this in the community. That's everything I have for you. Any questions?
I put all my questions at the end. So the trespass after warning is usually a retail or a business?
No, it could be a retail or business. It covers a whole host of
It could
things.
be domestic.
It could be retail, it could be a business, it could be someone hanging out on a property that's posted. Typically, we're probably more progressive when we have a complainant. You know, and if it's posted, no trespassing, and we have a trespass authorization sign, we can go there and take action, but typically we do it at the behest of the property owner.
So when you say controlled substance, I've brought this up before, that commissioners seem to think that cannabis is not an arrest, is not being arrested.
There are, I mean, if someone's illegal in possession of cannabis, we can arrest them, and we do.
So in the past, when it's been brought up, we were told that it's not something that you all are necessarily doing. So I'm wondering.
Typically, it's an arrest that's part of another arrest. So we stop a person, they have cannabis on them, they also have cocaine, Oxycontin, things like. Typically, there are more components to the arrest than marijuana. And we very rarely, if ever, take a person to jail for marijuana.
So the controlled substance, is cannabis considered, I'm just looking at statistics, a controlled substance?
Yes, cannabis is a controlled substance in accordance with the really state statute and the federal law.
So the, noticed it here, I noticed all 10 people, they all were white.
Yes. Say it again?
They all were white. I hear, and I believe you, that you're instructing officers.
You said
Noticed
all
here,
of who were white? Yes.
they were, all 10 of them were white.
Let me go back to that and see.
I could have asked as we went along, but I had written before.
Sheila, can you help me figure out which chart you're talking about? I just want to make sure I'm
I
following.
think she's combining
Yeah,
several of them.
Okay.
Notice the appear there were a total of 3 people, and they were all white. One-
Juvenile, okay, so I'm sorry.
Adult.
So then, the juvenile arrest, 10 for felony, I conflated. No, notice it here, only white, that's different. And the juvenile arrest, 10 felony, I see what they're for. So I guess these are ones that you have to arrest the juveniles for under code. And the last thing, I didn't see this chart on the back. Is this the statistics for 2021? Is that year-to-date, it looks like through April 19th for 2021?
Yes,
So it's year-to-year, the
Yes.
same? Cool,
Yes.
thank you.
you're welcome.
I super appreciate that you're doing this now.
We do appreciate it, and I think it helps us pick. I'm going to call on Ms. Melvin, and then I'll call Mr. Blunt. So, Ms. Melvin?
Is there a way that we could get, I know that these are kind of still open cases, so is there a way that we could get some kind of representative sample of why the officers like came in contact with these citizens to begin with in certain issues, in certain instances in here?
We would have to go back and read the reports.
I know it's a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if we can maybe give you a sampling of that.
Yeah, that's what I'm
you know.
saying, a representative sample of.
we
it.
really
I
sample.
think that
Can't
would
give
be
us
helpful.
everyone.
I think we'd like to read the police reports for just
Yeah.
those. Am I correct, Ms. Melvin, in that you're interested in the possession of controlled substance or other controlled substance?
Actually, I'm more interested
Okay.
in the racial disparities in all of these categories,
Okay.
which is why I was trying to find
Yeah.
out
Okay.
why they came in contact.
Yeah,
Just with the offerings.
I was just gonna ask for some clarification,
Yeah.
because we can, is it felonies?
Um,
Or misdemeanors? I mean, and this is arrest only, or do you want it for?
I'm actually trying to find out just a little bit more clarity on when the pre-arrests are offered and when notices to appear are offered in comparison to arrests. Does that make sense?
It does, and it would be hard, and I apologize, Chief, for interrupting. I just, so I get the right data
Uh-huh.
to you guys. I think it's the same question that Ms. Payne asked earlier, which is, or maybe Fareed it was, asking us, can we find out when an officer offers this, when they don't offer this? We wouldn't, in some of those cases, especially with the pre-arrest diversion, they're completing very simple paperwork in terms of the GPA form, which gets, it's not an arrest form, that kind of thing. But those, in the GPA arrest, if you remember, in the policy, there are certain criteria you have to meet in order to actually be offered a GPA arrest. And if the offense is the wrong type, meaning if it's a domestic, whether misdemeanor or felony, we can't offer it. If, you've met a different part of that criteria, maybe you have something in your criminal history that has, you're not allowed to have a GPA or a diversion, we can't offer that. So sometimes if you were to look at the person in totality, sometimes they're not able to actually do that. And as Chief said, Ms. Charlotte Jones, who came in and spoke, and she's in charge of our diversion program, she scrutinizes every NTA that comes in to whether or not it would have met the criteria for the program. And she goes to briefings and talks to all the officers and advocates for her program to say, listen, if you have the opportunity to offer this diversion program to an offender instead of an NTA or a sworn complaint or an arrest, this is an option, and here are the criteria that that person would have to meet. So we can resupply that policy again for the GPA.
No, not policy.
It's in the policy, the criteria for getting
Yeah,
into that program.
I remember the day that she came. I don't want to waste time, but I think that I think I'm not being clear.
That's
What
okay.
I'm-
Yeah,
I think I'm not being-
what I will say is that what we can do is maybe take a sampling of, we have to try to do a random sampling of some cases and pull it up and let you see how we got there, first of all, because that's the biggest thing is
Right,
how did we get there? How do we have the contact?
That's what
You
I'm
know,
asking.
Was it contact because we initiated a traffic stop, or was it because someone called because there was a problem? You know, typically in domestic situations, we will call. You can tell by the nature of the call. If it's a theft type situation, that too is going to be something that was called more than likely. You notice that on here you don't see a lot of resisting without violence. You know, that used to be, quite frankly, something we use quite often.
Oh, yeah.
We're not using that as much as we had in the past. Again, our contacts with the folks, we're mindful that we're still trying to develop that relationship and that trust. So I think to maybe give you, I can only think of one or two things you can do. One would be to put you in the car and tell you come on out and let's go ride, and let you ride with some of these officers that work in the more active areas. And then you're there, you can see how it happens and what's going on. The other would be to go ahead and sit down and just maybe pull a sampling. Maybe we can pull up about 25 cases and look at them and pull it up and say, okay, this out of these 25, and even give you the methodology that we use for randomly selecting. You know, we just kind of, we go by case report numbers and do every, every 10th number or something like that. So we can do that if you like, and then we can bring that back to the next meeting and give you that information.
Okay.
Okay?
I think that sounds promising for a sampling, and is your point to her point? Is it about this, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'll be on with you, Mr. Blunt.
Previous arrests were mentioned about
Yeah.
being a disqualification for the, is that a criteria?
It is not an absolute, well, it depends on the previous arrest, what the charge was, but we set it up so that you could go initially, and really, it's not just one. It used to be that if you had ever had it before, you were done. Now, I don't believe we stop it at the first offense. It can happen a couple of times, and you still get a chance at the program. Okay,
But I think that would probably answer a lot of questions. We did like a random sample of the March arrests and other things in this report, and I think that would probably answer some questions.
And see, what's missing here, and I think, and I want you to think about this, what you don't see is when we're not arresting someone.
Right.
Okay?
So there's that.
So, the numbers you have are going to be skewed toward people that we arrested. But there's a lot of folks we didn't arrest. And some I encountered where I got partner, you don't need to do that, do something else. And I happen to be, maybe I shouldn't tell the story, but I won't tell it. Happened to be in Sunset, a guy walks around the corner, and what does he have in his hand? He has a joint, and he's smoking it, and he sees it.
Are you kidding me?
That's exactly what I said. So I have an option at that point, right? Arresting, citing for, I asked him, do you have a card? He lied and said, yes, he does. And then I looked at him and said, really, man? And he goes, no, I don't have one. Okay? And he's in possession of marijuana. Obviously, he doesn't have a card. So what do I do? You don't see it on these statistics. Okay? I handle it a different way. And I'm not the exception. There are many officers that do something very similar to that. So there's a huge number that you just don't see.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Johnson? and
That
I'll
could
go
be,
back to-
that could be good or bad. That could go either way. Because you could have a disparity of people that are actually being arrested, and then another group of people that are being cut loose, that isn't being tracked.
Anytime an officer stops someone, typically you have to call it in and call in a description. So we have numbers on how many people you stop, and we have the demographics on what you stop. And we would have to, if somebody alleges something improper, we'd have to go back and check with that officer and find out. But, we concentrate on behavior. I want to emphasize that. I can tell you that race is not the major determining factor for the officers that we have here in Gainesville. It's the behavior. What are you doing that we need to address and try to correct? We like to think that every last one of our officers operating that vein, we might have one or two that we don't know about that don't do it, but that's the general, that's what I know I feel very strongly about. that my officers are out there not concentrating on the color of the folks they're dealing with, but to concentrate on the behavior and what's going on and trying to address that.
I think that's not easy. Mr. Blunt, you have questions?
Yeah, before my question, I will comment on what he just said. We know that there's also such a thing as implicit bias also, when the same officer may react one way to someone of one identity doing something and somebody of a different identity doing the exact same thing. On the notice to appear adult, back to that one where the alcohol beverage, person under 21. So I guess we're getting into a confusion of definitions there. 18 is adult, but the law on the alcohol is 21. So at first it looked funny to me that it's appearing on the adult page, but it says under 21. So it's like they're juvenile for the purpose of alcohol.
No.
But they're adult. At 18, they're an adult.
Yeah, they're 18, they're adult.
But the law is 21 for.
Right, and it's under the adult, on the adult page, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's an adult, they're 18, but they're underage as far as drinking goes.
So it's kind of like saying people under 18 are not adults yet for when it comes to alcohol.
No, we're just saying they're not old enough to
They're not,
drink.
they're still juveniles under 18, right?
Under 18.
Under 18, yes.
Yeah.
And the one thing I say to you as far as the potential disparity, one of the best ways to address disparity or potential disparity is to have a diverse workforce. And I'm proud of the fact that we have a very diverse workforce and very diverse supervisors. Male, female, black, white, Hispanic, we have it covered. And that is really your gatekeeper as far as appropriate behavior, because you have supervisors that are there that are not going to allow inappropriate behavior.
Unfortunately, research shows that even black people
Yeah.
have implicit bias toward each other. So that's not something the department can change.
Question when you're done.
Okay. Are you done, Mr. Blunt?
I'm done.
Just a brief question, Chief, that's going back to the increasing gun violence and the guns in the hands of young people, and there's been a lot of that in Gainesville. Or can you say if there are any upcoming plans or future plans to have another local gun buyback here in Gainesville?
Yeah, we have one scheduled for, I believe, around the first week of June.
Okay.
Again, I think it's going to be at Williams Temple. We have that set up, and again, our plans are ever changing and forward-looking. We're planning things for the summer with heat wave and Operation Respect Yourself. We're looking at working with Mr. Wayne Fields as far as summer employment. We're looking at the one community concept, going out and visiting different churches and some schools. We have a multitude of approaches that we're using because, again, we maintain that the only way we could be successful is as a community, that we're all working to deal with this problem. We have a lot of partners, and we appreciate those partners that we have.
The reason I mentioned because I remember the past commission meeting where Chief Jones, where you all had that display of guns that
Yes.
were confiscated. Or not, no, I mean, also, you mentioned about the past gun buybacks, which were, I feel, successful. So I think with that and with the other elements that you're mentioning, and I've been using my role as a local ministerial leader to try to spread that word and also emphasize the need to lock cars. So I've been doing that and working with other local pastors. So I'll continue to do that. But I just was wondering about the gun buy because I think the last ones were very good.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of guns turned in there would not have otherwise been.
Yeah, I agree, and any gun that we can keep out of the hands of a juvenile or someone who's not really mentally stable right now is critical. And I'm proud of my officers. I have officers that are, I mean, we're seizing more guns off that we encounter encounter off the street than I think at any time in our history. Our officers are very proactive, and I have a couple of them really good at going out and finding these guns and taking them off the street. So we're seizing more guns that have been stolen.
That's good, because it hits, you know, I don't mention it too often, but it hits home to me, because I was a victim of gun violence in my hometown of Philadelphia when I was only 11 years old, and I was shot by a gang. And so this issue really hits home for me personally.
Yeah.
So while I'm constantly hoping and praying that it ends and there's an end to all of these guns and young people being involved with these guns, because every time I hear about a situation, my mind goes back as to what happened to me in Philadelphia. So I take it kind of personal.
Yeah, and
Through
certainly,
my own experience.
I think, and we like to impart this on the folks that, many of us had the opportunity, not the pleasure, but the opportunity to knock on the door and tell a parent that their loved ones won't be coming home. And that is something you do not forget, and you don't want to have to do it. So we'd rather go out on the front end, talk to these folks, and try to convince them that there's another way to resolve conflict as opposed to dealing with a gun and picking up a gun.
Well, thank you. I think we appreciate all the efforts, and I also appreciate the communication, social media effort to communicate to people, hey, go out and lock your car.
So you're
Which
saying
sounds
that, yeah,
kind of
thank you.
ridiculous, but oh my goodness, the volume of guns that are stolen from cars
Oh,
is
yeah.
really mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I believe we're over 100. I think it's about 100 at this point. I know we've seized over 100. I think maybe we've had stolen from cars, maybe something like 80.
I mean, that's just a lot. I'll just leave it at that. I'll just say that is a lot, so I
Well,
appreciate that.
What surprises me is the unlocked cars.
Yeah, that's-
Right,
There's one
and you
thing
have a
if they
gun
break
in
the
your,
glass.
in your lockbox and you
Yeah.
don't lock anything.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, I find that tough. Well,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
And appreciate it. Our next section is sort of internal council business, but I think we can move through this. So the first is a draft of our PAC annual report to City Commission. I am willing to confess I'm the author. I'm open to any edits or topics. I tried to keep it really concise. I did the verbal annual report last year and essentially just tried to hit home the things, because last year was our sort of organizational year. And this year I just tried to say, here are things we're up to, this is where anything. I would recommend, if there's something burning, I'm happy to accept it as an amendment here. I'm also happy to accept any edits. I mean, for me, I would just say that when I get a Word document, it's easier for me to edit than to be like, I think this word is stupid. But I'll be happy to submit it, and we'll work out if it's Duncan or I who are going at the last minute. But either way, I tried to just summarize our work and say what we're up to. So are there any concerns, or, because it's really y'all's report, it's sometimes just easier to look at something that's, here's the draft. Well, you know, I'm paid full-time to be a bureaucrat, so that's what I do. Yes, Ms. Mann?
I would add how
Sure.
helpful it's been for Chief Scott. I did read this before we came, so I don't know if it's in here. Scanning, I don't see it. Bringing every month the statistics.
Okay, I can add that, no problem.
But this, you're a good writer. I do
Or
wish.
I'm a professional bureaucrat, and I'm willing to accept that. That's-
Yeah, I mean, it says adult and juvenile arrest data and trends. I think I would emphasize how much discussion maybe
And discussion, I can do
about
that, no problem at all. Happy to do that.
Chief Scott.
I worked really hard to get to that one page, let me tell you.
Yeah,
No, this wasn't good.
I do stuff and then I think, oh, I could go on for 7 pages, but nobody wants to read 7 pages, so there you have it. Well, I would recommend, if there's anything else you'd like to bring up now, that's totally fine. And/or if you're an editor person, want to hack it up, that is okay too. My feelings will not be hurt. This is tried to.
I edit a lot of writing, this is good writing.
I'll take it. That's my highlight of today.
Can't find any
Ms. Payne.
typos, and I think just.
I'll make a couple of changes and I'll send it on to Ms. Holt. She can do that with the feedback. Yes.
Are all of these days covering the same curriculum for neighborhood police?
We're about to talk about it, so hold tight. So the next item, and I'll jump, if we need to jump back to that, that's totally fine. So our next topic on our agenda is the Neighborhood Policing Initiative Training. And, hang on, I know it's here, I'm just piling.
It's the flip side of the annual report.
Thank you, because I have plenty of paper in my life. Thank you. Thank you. So, oh, I'm the wrong thing. Yet again, story of my life. There it is. Okay, it's on the back page of the report. There are dates to attend. I will personally commit to May 27th, and you can write that down because I can do that, and I blocked it off, and Lord knows that's the tough of us. And I would say to any of you, if you're able to attend, please do, and you can, me and Freed will hang out, and we'll have a good time. And if you are able, you may need to check your personal calendar, and if you can't, you can't, life goes on. Yes, Ms. Jane?
So no one wants to do the Saturday. People said they didn't. It's hard for me. I start work at 7:30 a.m.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to cut out a day,
Sure.
except for Saturday.
Yeah,
So other
Saturday,
people don't want to do.
I generally would not prefer to do a Saturday. I might be able to do June 11.
That's
but-
the day I could do it. Does anybody else want to do Saturday? Or I think people said they didn't want to.
And it's okay if you can't do it. I mean, life gets in the way of our best laid plans.
I mean, I would like to do it with the whole group, not
Sure.
sit there with strangers. I've
Sure.
already sat with a lot of police
Is
officers,
anybody else
strangers
interested in the
before.
Saturday, June 11th date? Does that work for anybody else?
This is Evelyn. I don't think I want Saturdays as well. That's a bad day
Okay.
to me.
Can you remind
What
me
other
what,
day is available? What other day can we do it?
Okay.
You know?
Well, Fareed and I can do Friday, May 27th, because that just happens to work out. I'll take a day of vacation from work and do it. But that's because I have the privilege to do that. I mean, I realize that. I will tell you, Saturday, June 11th is the day I'm packing my two 12-year-olds for Camp Crystal, and I'll be delighted to run away that day and let anybody else come to my home to pack them up, but I wouldn't assign that to anybody in the world.
Camp Crystal,
Uh,
other privilege.
I want to try the May 16th, but I'm switching my duty at Shands to the ER
Okay,
in
so
the
you
month
need
of
to
May. So I
check in on your work.
don't know my schedule yet,
Okay.
but if I have that date open, and where do we report to at just before 8 a.m.?
That's a good question.
To the Gainesville Police Department. It is hosted in our Hall of Heroes Conference
Okay.
community room.
Okay, so just show up to that room
Yes, sir.
Okay.
ahead of 8 a.m.
Can you remind me what the neighborhood police training is?
Chief Scott.
Chief Scott, you want to better explain it than I could of what the neighborhood policing training would be? Because I will give a bad summary.
Yes, the Neighborhood Police Initiative is a training that we developed to really, it's to take our neighbors and the police officers and put them in the same room and really go through the process of how do you identify problems in the neighborhoods and how do you develop action plans and then who's responsible for doing what. So it's really trying to teach them how to work together as a group to deal with problems that are in the neighborhood. But we cover things like the history of law enforcement because if you're going to be successful, you really need to know where you've been. So we sit down with them, talk about this is how law enforcement has come about. We talk about what our limitations are. We educate people, quite frankly, about some of the history here at GPD, some of the history of law enforcement as a whole, but also some of the programming that we already have that's existing that people have no idea the things that we do that are available to them. So it's an educational tool. But more than anything else, it gives the officers also a chance to listen to the citizens about their perceptions about what they do and how they do it. and how we can do it better. So we have some really good dialogues that occur between the two, and it's intended for you to solicit that information and for you to provide that information. We want a dialogue, not a monologue. You know, we want to make sure that there's conversation, and some of the conversations are lively, you know, but they're informative. And the people, we've had officers walk out saying, you know, I want to participate in this. Can I become an instructor? And they've become instructors in the program because they're so wrapped up in the outcome of what they did, and they saw the benefit of the program. And we have our neighbors to walk out, and they learn things that they didn't know about. You know, you see officers, you think one thing about them, and then you find out that, you know what, they're just like me. They just happen to wear a uniform, but they're just like me. Some of the same concerns that I have.
Thank you. Reverend Pratt?
Madam Vice Chair, you know, I looked at all these dates, and it's a great program. But in my case, none of these were for me, because at the same time all these are going on, I'm on duty right here at City Hall in my capacity as lead security officer. I'm retiring in August.
Are you really?
Yes, after not only being here for 3.5 years, but after 44 years in this business, security and law enforcement. So I wouldn't even be able to attend any of these until the one in September.
Okay.
That's why I won't be seen, because I'm here
That's acceptable.
at City Hall.
Life goes on.
Yes.
So am I correct that the current 8 to 2 neighborhood policing training is already being offered, and we would just jump in on stuff that's already being offered? Am I correct? Okay. Mr. Blunt?
You're probably the one that will get the least new insights because of your own history. But it was very interesting to me that he said they would talk about the history of policing, if that's just the history of GPD or the history of policing in America, because that actually goes back to slave catching, and Governor DeSantis might get after us for talking about that.
That's a different problem. Okay.
Well, we're not a school, so we're covered. But no, we are keenly aware of the history, and quite honestly, when we touched upon it, I think we surprised some of our officers. You know, I used to teach at Santa Fe, and I taught law enforcement and really about the history of policing, and so we created that instruction, and I think we hit a couple of nerves when we did it. You know, but we wanted to show folks, I mean, there's a little knowledge, or you just don't think that about watches. Well, I mean, if you watch TV shows now and you listen, you hear people talk about the night watch or in the police agencies about watches. Well, that's because it emanated from back when we had slave watches. You know, we had neighborhood watches, and so all of that played into it, and you know, you have to educate folks about it, and then you try to educate them on why there needs to be a little more effort in certain neighborhoods to try to tear down those walls. And I think our officers received it well, and really it progressed and went forward well, very well.
I'm sure we could all learn plenty. Mr. Crowley?
I'll just share one quick story that Tony Jones' late father told me. He was a night watchman at the University of Florida, and they decided to deputize the agency and make it a university police department, deputize security guards. So the big issue, and it was a big issue, I'm guessing around 60, but I don't know precisely, do we give a black man a gun?
Interesting.
It was a big debate. He told me he got the gun, but he said it was a debate. Such things didn't happen.
Fascinating.
You know, people don't realize, I think it's really, I applaud that we're doing the history, because people don't understand what some of the local history is about. You know, you can still see a few stores that have 2 water fountains. You wonder why, and you know, these things exist. It's here.
Sure.
It's not elsewhere.
Yes, and just to add, up until 1993, Santa Fe College was strictly a security officer run, but it became the very first junior college in the state to form its own police department in 1993, and I became a member of the very first police force. So that's also important history for as far as local.
Yeah.
You know, you all know Santa Fe College is chief ed book, but it all began in 1993, and those of us who were simply unarmed security officers became sworn police officers in August of 1993.
Wow.
And that's very important local history right here in Gainesville.
I have to excuse myself, I have to be at a 7:30 meeting.
That's okay, we're gonna cruise through the rest
I
of
know,
the meeting, but
and
I
I
think we got a
apologize.
quorum, so we're
You
gonna,
hope.
move on. So I would
See
just
if
say, look at your calendars, I think there is probably not a mass support for a Saturday session.
Okay, I got
Which
that.
life goes on.
I'm gonna figure
You'll see
later
if
in
you
the
can figure
summer.
something out,
I'm
let me know.
gonna figure it out.
Okay. I get it, Ms. Payne, I totally get it. Review of remaining discussion items. I would just say, there, on the topics requested to be future meeting, is there anything jumping out at any of us?
I see a lot of these are ones I sent in initially.
Though they're all good topics, so is there something specific you'd like us to prioritize for a really short-term meeting?
Well, we did talk about demilitarization before, but I'd like an update. The GPD budget, we've never talked about. The list of all GPD programs with youth that could be handled by another department I sent in. I think that the undocumented communities, I'm satisfied about that, the progress that's been made in the last 2 years. Decriminalizing activities, but State Attorney Kramer just went out. The gang unit, that was some of the ones I sent in.
Sure, and I will add on there, and this is for Chair Purvis, I know did we ever end up talking about license plate readers, or?
Yeah, we
Yes,
did.
We did, I think it was probably one I missed, so it's fine. I just want to make sure, he wrote he does a lot of work in that area, so that's why I want to make sure we don't box him out, but I think the
Yeah,
GPD
it's right,
budget would be a
it's
good.
right here.
Okay, perfect. And I think the GPD budget might be a good one to prioritize because I think it's coming up on budget season. So I would like to hear kind of where we are with budget needs, because if there's something we can do as a board in support or whatever, or concern, now is the time before they get to their summer budget hearing. So perhaps that could be the priority for next time.
Well, I listed underneath the ideas I had about it.
Sure, and I'm fine with that, and I think we will hear a little more about what they have, what they're requesting, what's happening next, because there's a decision point in the next month or two. So I would probably start with that one, just because of the timing. Mr. Blunt?
In the past, I've been involved in efforts in Gainesville to get an actual citizens review board. You've been involved too in the past.
12 years ago.
So I would like to ask that members of this committee be educated on what that is and what is the difference between what we're doing now and a true, fully authorized review board.
I think that's a
fully
good
empowered
question. I
review
happen
board.
to know, because I happen to be at the right time, right place, but I think that's a very important conversation.
And that-
Illegal subpoena powers is one of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That's what I meant by fully empowered. And so I think the members of this should know that, because we're gonna have discussion of these cases.
Sure.
And we can only, early on, the police council was doing community meetings frequently.
Right.
And people would come to the meetings and they would express complaints, and there was a lot of frustration because they were simply told, well, we'll refer it to the chief. So there was no power to take on things autonomously. There was just what the,
Well, I think we could ask the city attorney to kind of come back and explain this versus that and what the parameters are. I think that's a very reasonable request.
I would be interested in that as well.
Yeah, so I think we could probably make those happen sooner than later.
I'd also be interested, I'm sorry, in the
That's fine.
implicit bias training as well.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can get scheduled immediately, and we'll just keep going. Because I mean, these are all legitimate, great topics. Mr. Johnson?
We discussed the GPA program a lot tonight. I think it would be good to either have Ms. Jones come back and do a
Okay.
more formal.
Well, I think especially if we end up having the summaries of what happened, sort of more information, we could then follow up. So maybe he
Absolutely.
comes back next time, and then perhaps maybe some timing might be needed, but I'd love to read kind of what got sent to this, what got sent to that, sort of the fact patterns, and then we can ask some questions. Okay. Well, I think that's a good start. We will continue to revisit it because we only have so many meetings in a row. And I'm also trying to make us reach our time. And then finally, our community crime watch meetings. You've got a nice schedule in here, and I would encourage one of two things. I would encourage two things actually. I would encourage each member to find a crime watch meeting that works with your life, time, schedule, logistics. And I also, I don't know, Chief Scott, I realize I'm putting you on the spot. What's the status of anybody want to do a ride along? Is that sort of back on track these days, or we're still not sure, or things have been a little quiet for a while, so I didn't know how receptive you might be.
We'll be more than happy to arrange it for you.
So I would encourage each of you, if you've not been on a ride along in a while, do it, especially in an area that you're interested in, or a topic you're interested in, because I think GPD can match you up. Because I always find, I learn something every time I do a ride along. It's been a couple of years, so you might be due for a revisit. My ability to stay up till 2 a.m. is less these days, but that's a different problem.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. I did a ride along years ago with Diamond Smith, and I learned so much about what somebody with incredible empathy can do
Yeah.
in the job. I was so impressed, and I wish everybody was exactly like him.
Ride along, and I was actually thinking about trying to ride along with the mental health responder team, because I thought, my goodness, that is, talk about something that's really happening today. I've done plenty of bar ride-alongs, but it might be time to see what's happening in 2022. Okay, we're going to move along because we have some other business to conduct. I know we have an Office of City Auditor overview, and Ms. Bigby, our City of Gainesville Auditor, thank you for sitting with us tonight. I know you sit through plenty of city meetings, but we're just plain old citizens, and we'd love to hear more about what you're up to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vice Chair Mastro DeCasso, and members for letting us come and just give you a few words about what internal audit does. So this will be very short, not too painful. And if the video clip works, I have a really short video clip
We
to
like
show you
videos.
the largest municipal fraud in U.S. history that we know of. So it's
All right, well, we'll
interesting.
see if we can make that happen.
Okay, and then I think Deborah has that. Thank you,
Through
Deborah.
our test Ms. Holt's abilities to run the 12 screens.
All right, next slide, please. Internal auditors are required to have a college degree, but we come from many different disciplines, so we're not all bean counters. Those of us who are certified public accountants mostly have an accounting degree or have to take additional accounting classes. But we have economics, marketing, pretty much anything that you're interested in, folks that have business experience, enjoy risk management, IT people, cybersecurity, operational risk management, often make really great auditors. So. If you know of any, funnel them our way. We still have one vacancy. We have various certifications, including the criminal justice security awareness training that we do through our GPD. And we have to do, it's just a short training, but it makes sure that you're really up to speed on how to handle data in the criminal justice information systems. And then we get fingerprinted with GPD. It's a little bit more than what you do for a normal background check in employment.
Okay, makes sense.
And there's some other interesting things you can read. This is our organization chart. We were going to add an FTE, and that was before the Great Resignation. So we're sticking with our staff size right now. The whole city is suffering, trying to staff up, trying to hire new people. So GPD is not the only department that's really significantly impacted by that.
I will just comment that I have the exact same issue with business operations in my segment at the University of Florida. Trying to find people has been really tough.
Very tough. But at the same time, some people may want to relocate to Florida. So we actually had a recent hire for someone, a very strong person that's going to come down here and start in June. So if we could just be a little more creative in our recruiting efforts, I think we'll be able to get some good people here. Next slide, please. This slide tells a little bit about what we do. I'll just take a few minutes, a few seconds actually, to talk about that. But you may wonder, how do we even decide what to audit? So we do a process called an enterprise risk assessment every other year, where we go in and talk to management. We try to interview all levels of management, but we can't reach everybody. And then all senior level management we interview. And we just ask them, what keeps you awake at night? What's bothering you? What kind of process improvements are you looking at? We tell them where we might be able to help them. And then we also inform through other data sources where we know there's been problems. We'll bring those up for discussion. Management is the most significant contribution to our enterprise risk assessments. So what we do are audit engagements. That's a very formal assurance process. We come in and audit a process after the fact to make sure that everything was working according to policy or procedures or law, whatever it is that regulates that process. We also do consultations, and now that we're short-staffed, consultations are more important than ever. Advisory projects can be scoped any way that management needs it, and it's typically where we're providing input or contributing to development of a new process, or management wants to develop a new policy, and how can we contribute to that. So we can't write things and perform management functions, but we can challenge them, challenge their risk assumptions, and ask them, we have sources that show that this might be higher risk. What do you think about that? So it's more of a collaborative effort without us making the final management decision. Small scope projects, Chief Scott asked us about internal controls over handling gift cards when they did their most recent gun buyback. The result of that is it took very little time, but they ended up having no problems with the gift cards. So they were one of 3 departments that got a certificate of recognition for that. Management requests can be really small projects. It doesn't have to be a formal advisory project. So if you all had ideas, you could run it through police management, and if they think it's something that internal audit could help them with, we could certainly consider that. And so far, we've not had a management request that we could not accommodate. Audit issue follow-up. What's the point of doing audits if we don't make sure that the audit issues are closed? So we try to be as thoughtful as possible on writing audit issues. It's not old school where we find 10 things wrong and we give you 10 audit issues. It's not like that anymore. We try to combine errors and risk rate them, so moderate and high will end up being some type of audit issue. And then we work with management on what's going to be the best action plan. We can make recommendations, but management are the subject matter experts, so they know what they can do and in what time frame they can do it. And then we come back later to see, were you able to do what you said you could do in a certain time frame. And the testing has to be pretty thorough because, if you're going to do a new policy or carry out a new process, we actually have to make sure that that's happening. So it is a little bit time consuming, but in the end, it achieves the desired results. And then one thing we do is investigation. So the way that differs from, obviously we're not law enforcement, but we have 3 certified fraud examiners on our team. And in one organization that I worked in, I actually worked occupational fraud. So anytime there's a crime, of course, it gets reported to police. But what police may not do is talk about internal controls with management. How did this happen? Did you shore up your internal controls so that it doesn't happen again? So that's where we come in. And even if we're doing one right now where we didn't actually do the investigation, but we're following up on internal controls with management to make sure there's a reasonable assurance that a similar fraud couldn't happen again.
Okay, I think we have a question, Mr. Blunt?
There's a function, I think it's called risk management. When something that is done by a city department causes monetary damage to a citizen's property, and there's a decision to pay them, to give them reimbursement for material damage, is that called risk management?
Yes, sir.
And does that go through your office?
No, sir. That goes through, Mr. Varvel and Mr. Jarvis work in that department. Do they report to HR? I'm not sure. They report up under HR, but there is a separate risk management department that handles that.
Yeah, so I always, so like if GRU comes and torches all your trees, they might reimburse the property owner.
Oh, look, an example
For example, hypothetically.
They destroy all the
Anyway, hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Move on. It's all good, but yes, that's.
Right, and another
Different part.
distinguishing factor with internal investigations for occupational fraud, it would be committed by a staff member. So we don't handle investigations in the community. If someone in the community commits theft at a store, that's a police matter, but we would not investigate that as occupational fraud. How can we improve your controls? So we're trying to improve the city of Gainesville's operations and processes, if that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
So yes, GPD completed audits. What do we got?
So completed audits, this is what we've done in the last couple of years, and I came here in February 2020. The Reichert House audit had just finished, so I inherited the audit issues from that. Then we did the citywide gift card audit, which GPD did very well on that. Body worn compliance audit, and I'll talk to that in just a second. GPD property and evidence cache audit. And then management had a special request in December 2020 for us to observe a GPD inventory count of the narcotics area. So that worked out well. Then on the next page, please. From those audits, these are the audit issues that have been closed. So this is where you will see what your management has done for process improvement. And often they don't get enough recognition for that. That takes a lot of work to improve processes and change things. People change. They have to learn new things. Sometimes you have to acquire new software or equipment. So for the body worn compliance audit, two of those are closed. One is scheduled to be closed. We're just waiting on one final process, a final monitoring process, and it has to take its iteration in April, so we expect to close that in May.
And P is what?
Policy and procedures. Yes, sorry. GPD property and evidence cache audit. GPD management completed their portion. They updated their policy and procedure. But finance is on hold because you may or may not know our finance department is being rebuilt right now, and they're focusing on the external audit first. They have a really strong team in there, but they still have to hire. They have a lot to tackle right now. So once they get the external financial statement audit done, they will continue improving internal controls. Part of that is supporting the other departments, and GPD will need their support for this process change. Separation of key duties, which is the short video clip to tell you why that's so important. Management has done that. Oversight and monitoring of key controls, they are now performing that. And information technology controls, that's often especially for legacy systems or in-house built systems. Are we patching them? Did we apply the right user access management controls? So that means least privilege access. You want to make sure that folks can only do what they need to do to perform their jobs. You don't want to give them like super user access if they don't need it. And then separation of duties. You don't want one person being able to do everything. Handle cash, go to the bank, reconcile the bank statement. They shouldn't do all of that. So you figure out where would we have the proper separation in there. Reichert House Youth Academy, we closed all of those issues. That was a lot of work, so GPD management worked very closely with us. A lot of people contributed to those process improvements. The only one we couldn't close was grants because recently Reichert House hasn't had any new grants to test. Next slide, please. Upcoming audits that will impact GPD, the citywide fleet management audit, we'll be focusing on the city and GRU first and RTS, and then we'll circle back with GPD management to see if the timing will work for a fleet management audit for GPD. Yes, sir.
There's something that I've wondered about GPD vehicles. I want to see if it comes under that. I've seen many times that police officers will be doing a citizen contact or even just taking a break, going in a coffee shop to get a beverage, and the car is left running. And I understand that there's something about the information systems in the car that they don't want to have that shut down. Having that shut down and having to wait for it to reboot could interfere with function. So, but gas is getting so expensive.
It is.
So will this audit talk about the amount of fuel that's used with leaving vehicles running? Maybe we need to think about having a auxiliary power system in cars so that equipment can run without the engine running for a while, or something like that. Is that the kind of issue that would come under that audit?
Yes, sir. So I can't say for sure we would test that specifically, but we would consider that risk in planning. And assuming that would be a moderate or high risk, that would absolutely be something that we look at, test the process, and are there any improvements we can suggest?
Well, I think about risk too. Somebody jump in the car
Yeah.
and take off.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
no, I think these are all, I would say, my comment on all these planned audits, these are all things where people could go astray very easily. So I think they're good topics.
Yep, the police overtime and billing, hopefully we can catch up on any that we were missing, but with COVID, we didn't do.
Yeah, there wasn't much overtime.
Yeah, but it's starting up again, so. Citywide monitoring of purchasing card and travel expense activity. What that means is that we're setting up a new program within our office, just citywide, to regularly look at these types of transactions. It's really a management monitoring process, but while our finance department is being rebuilt, that's something that we'll start we do risk-based analytics, and then we pick some transactions, so GPD would be included in that. And then any special requests that GPD management has, we would accommodate that. And we're going to try, I'm going to try to share my screen to do a short video clip.
All right,
And
let's
if it
see if we
doesn't
can
work,
do this.
and it's very short. And I have to,
Oh, I'm laughing because I had a visit from the investigative auditor at UF, and we watched some of this, or talked about this, so, yeah.
okay. So
But it's great, you guys, it's on Netflix, this is a great,
Yeah.
this is a Netflix movie.
Uh,
You watch it, it's worth it.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my sound, and I'm going to, I think I have to. Nope. All right, let's see if you all can hear it.
The old St. Pat's in Chicago. And the usher says, "Where are you from?" I said, "Dixon." He goes, "Oh, you're the town that the woman stole the $54 million from."
It is the biggest case of municipal fraud in history. The tiny town of Dixon, Illinois, lost an astonishing $53 million to one government employee.
If fraud at this magnitude is happening in Dixon, it can happen anywhere.
Federal agents and local police carry out raids
for half a decade. Non-top officials wires have taken $150 million.
Fraud is a local, national, and international problem. Over the past 5 years, we've seen a steady rise in fraud schemes, specifically embezzlement schemes committed by an employee within a finance position.
Allegedly embezzling thousands of dollars, $4 million.
Embezzlement is a $3.7 trillion problem. Government entities are the second most frequent victims of embezzlement.
A nationally renowned horse breeder, a city employee since the 1980s, and a world-class thief.
The number one question people ask me is, how does one person in a small town steal $53 million and no one know, and get away with it for 20 years?
So that's available streaming if you're interested. All the Queen's Horses. I met Dr. Kelly Pope up in Minneapolis, and she's just amazing. She did the documentary, so that was her in the very last segment of that. So I just wanted to comment that we talked about separation of duties as one of the improvements that management made at GPD, and the reason that fraud was perpetrated up in Dixon, Illinois, is a lack of separation of duties. She could do everything. Take in cash, manage the accounts, balance the accounts. The external auditor performed financial statement transactions because they didn't have a very large accounting department. That was a firm that also was her private tax attorney, so they didn't want to lose all that business with all the money that she was making. So conflict of interest with that firm, they ended up paying a lot in the end, a huge settlement.
It's more common in smaller towns.
Yes. Yeah,
Clerk can be omnipotent.
But there's still things that even small teams can do to overcome the separation of duties risk.
Right, it's all about that separation of duties and having two different people. And one of the hardest things, if those two people are wanting to conspire with each other, it is, you're sort of relying on that they're going to be honest and check each other, but they don't. But I promise, if you watch that Netflix movie, it'll bring something to your heart. I don't know exactly what, but it is worth watching it.
Well, that's all I have. Do you have any other questions?
I do not have any questions for it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for being here.
We'll come back next year if it's okay.
And please do, and I hope you have exciting, positive things to report about GPD.
Thank you very much.
All right, so our next final business item of the evening is our closed IA case review. And we have two from year 22, one is 001 and one is 005, and I'll turn it over to Chief Inspector Koenig.
Good evening, everyone. We do have two cases tonight. So we'll start with case 22-001. The data came into IA was February 15th of 2022. It involves Officer Justin Schnitzler. The complainant is Pierre Marjani. And basically, the investigation revealed Mr. Marjani complained that he didn't believe he committed the offenses. He explained to Officer Schnitzler that he was a medical worker and was on his way and deals with COVID patients. And Officer Schnitzler navigated the traffic stop, issued 2 traffic citations. We reviewed all the body-worn camera and all of the evidence from the case. Lieutenant Lugo is actually the individual who conducted the investigation into this case. And after looking at everything, it even goes into the court disposition of the case, of the 2 citations and one of the citations being dropped. And really they found the improper traffic stop was unfounded. There was no evidence that had occurred. But during the traffic stop, Officer Schnitzler used a term, "I don't care." So following in our community policing efforts, as we always do, that officer was verbally counseled about that use of the language. Not vulgar, but definitely maybe a different way to be handled. So even though we didn't find any we didn't find that the case had any validity to it, on the front end, even identifying an issue with some language usage by the officer was addressed by the lieutenant. Does anyone have any questions about this case or anything that I can answer?
I have no questions, board?
No question.
Seeing none?
Okay, so the next case is 22-005. This involves an officer that was on a call, and this was a shooting call. And the officer came in contact with several juveniles who actually identified one of the juveniles who may have witnessed the crime. So the officer, before engaging with that juvenile, walked down to his house, interacted with what had appeared to be an older sister, which was later identified, and asked permission to talk to the young man about what had happened. And basically the sister gave permission, the officer talked to that juvenile, but the mom was upset that the officer didn't ask her permission to talk to the juvenile, and that there were some threats that were made to this family after this case had occurred. There's no violation here. We asked, and someone that was in the house. This one was also definitely exonerated, and they're followed within policy, followed within guidelines. There was no ill intent by the officer. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it's the thing about policy versus what happens to the family. So I'm wondering if there is a better way to handle the child's name not being in the report. So, and also, I think the officer, it's great they're able to get the child to talk. That doesn't always happen, but maybe the parent could have brought the child to the station. I do think that having the police officer go to the home, maybe the family felt they might be threatened in the community because people were talking. So I'm just wondering if it was possible the mom could have brought the child down to the police station so that they didn't feel like people would threaten him because he was talking. And that's why people don't talk. So that's my only thing. I'm sure he followed all the procedures.
Yes, I am. Thank you for that. But Ms. Payne, I just want to make sure I didn't miss a question, because I didn't want to.
Oh, no.
Okay.
A lot of what I say isn't a question.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
my comment about the family did feel threatened. Is there a way, even though the police officer followed the policy procedure, that could have been handled outside of the neighborhood so that people saw that the child was being questioned by a police officer and the family didn't have to feel afraid?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes in these circumstances, there's exigency.
Right.
In trying to identify somebody who may be in custody or some other thing, some other key piece of evidence that we need. And sometimes time is not, we are not capable of doing that. In certain circumstances where there's not exigency, that could be arranged if that was requested, and we would follow that, no problem, at a witness's request, like, hey, I'll meet you at the station, I don't want to talk to you here, and we do that often. But, without knowing the exact circumstances of the discussion and what type of information he was trying to get, I can only surmise he was trying to get it quickly. Unfortunately, with addressing the name being redacted, we have to do it this way. This is the software that we have for the juvenile's name not being in the report. We do that for victims and for individuals who are under 18. So.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt, and then Mr. Johnson.
Do you think there was a presumption or a hope when the child was walked to the home that this person that answered the door was authorized to let the child be interviewed?
I'm not that officer, but I would assume so, sir. I would assume without having Officer Sacalarius here, I couldn't give you that information.
Yeah, that was my conclusion.
Yes.
But I get your question, but I get that.
We try to do that. I mean, we try to contact parents and have that conversation. Sometimes it's, or someone who's watching the child, because it's not always the parent. You got aunts and uncles and grandparents. Yeah, so sometimes it's whoever the person is at the time.
Mr. Johnson?
Is there not a supplemental document that could be used for interviewing a juvenile that wouldn't be made public to prevent them from being put in the report?
All information that is part of an investigation during the investigation is closed, like we're not going to provide it to the public, but once that case goes to the state attorney's office, gets closed, and it becomes a public record, we can't deny access to investigative information, but we can and do redact juvenile information from the reports and don't release it. So unfortunately, a lot of the people involved in the incidents know everybody in the neighborhood and know, or themselves were involved in the incident, and sometimes that is a reason that they end up, someone knows that they were involved, and then that ends up, people threatening them or people having conversations with them. It's in small neighborhoods, that's hard sometimes. Especially when if there's a shooting, you're going to see a lot of police. We respond, sometimes, good majority of the officers working will respond. So it creates an environment where everybody's outside, everybody's watching everybody, right? Everybody. And it's just the nature of the calls for service when they're like that.
Any other questions from the board?
Not for her, but I have one question.
Okay, so I think we're done with questions. Comment or question, Ms. Payne?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that State Attorney Kramer's here, but we can talk about it next time. I'm concerned about the case where 2 deaf people were not provided an interpreter. I know it's probably still an open case, so y'all will say you can't talk about it, but an interpreter was not provided, and he was arrested, and though what's considered a victim, even though the state's attorney may charge Ms. Ramos, also, who's also deaf, so at no point was an
Yeah,
interpreter.
come on up, Mr. Kramer, if you have any information, I presume this is still working its way.
It's not, we tried this case,
Oh,
and
you did?
the person was convicted.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
I
because
didn't
they
know
didn't
any-
have an interpreter no interpreter was offered. The,
The person was convicted because the proof met the elements of the crime.
yeah, I would like to talk about it further. Is Ms. Ramos going to be, can you say?
I don't know who Ms. Ramos is.
She was the person who's the alleged victim.
So you're asking me
who's
if I'm
also
going to
deaf.
charge the
It's-
victim of a
it's-
domestic battery with a crime?
Says that you are. They both, I guess,
Were they both arrested?
It's not in
Okay.
the report I got.
I'm not
but-
aware of that, and generally speaking, we don't charge both sides of a domestic dispute with a crime. That makes it very, very difficult to prosecute. Generally impossible, which is why the statutes, Florida statutes say that the police are supposed to arrest the primary aggressor and not arrest anyone else, because from a prosecution standpoint, if you arrest both people, they both have a right to remain silent. So we have no way of interviewing either one of them to get either side of the story. So then we have no evidence, and the case just goes away.
Well, it does
But
say
factually-
state's attorney's office is also pursuing a battery case against Ramos, but I guess the question is why the police department did not provide an interpreter. They did not understand
Well,
their
Ms. Payne,
rights.
let me just quickly ask Chief Inspector, is there any sort of internal affairs complaint on this topic, or no?
Not that we have now.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
So
This
it's,
case is old, isn't it? It's from
so
2020.
it sounds like, yeah,
I
so
thought
I really know very little other than kind of what I've
Well, what I
heard.
read was March 24th, 2020.
I think that it closed in 2022, but the case is pretty old. I'm familiar with the case myself. I think the criminal case just recently closed, but it happened in
Yeah, it had
2020.
been pending for
Well,
several
I
years.
guess
Yeah.
I want to ask if we could talk at some point about whether interpreters are now being provided. I know
So-
y'all have done a lot of work with the undocumented community and people whose first language is not English.
So Ms. Payne, perhaps I suggest that next month we ask for a little information from GPD, how they handle cases when either somebody doesn't speak English or
Well,
is
I
deaf.
know about that. I'm with a committee that does that. I'm
Okay.
talking about deaf interpreters.
Okay, just, you want to keep it limited to
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
That'll be fine. I think we can ask GPD to just give us a read on, what's happening out there. I really don't know much other than what I think I've read just a little bit about it, but I think that would probably be the best case for this committee to talk about.
Yeah,
is
I
getting
just need an
GPD.
answer about the interpreter.
Sure, so perhaps we'll ask Chief Inspector Koenig to come back next month. It sounds like that case has been closed, so the criminal part is completed on your end. But I think your concern is, what are we providing for interpretive assistance for deaf individuals in a situation?
Yeah,
Okay.
according to the Justice Department guidelines.
Sure, I really don't know much, so thank you, Mr. Kramer. I think that'll help us, because I don't know what else to ask. All right, I'm gonna see if we can wrap it up. I've got public comment. Chief Inspector Koenig, you got something to?
I just wanted to add, and I
Sure,
apologize,
please do.
I read so many cases.
There was a lot of.
So on the conversation on the juvenile case where we're talking about 005, just to add a little follow-up. So the juvenile actually approached the officer on a perimeter position. So the officer is standing out, watching streets and navigating, and that juvenile approached him and gave him the information, and then the officer walked the juvenile home. So you know that we can talk to kids without parental permission. They're witnesses, we do that all the time. So I think, Kylie, or Mr. Blunt, you asked me about, what was his intention, Officer Sakalarius, and I'm sure he was just trying to get him home to a safe environment. But that young man was being kind and provided that information to him.
Yeah, it sounded
So,
like, from
yeah,
what I
like-
read, it was all very voluntary.
Yes, and I'm like just wanted to make sure you guys understood that part, so.
Yeah, and I think our concern has been answered by what you try to do to protect those who provide information,
We
which I
de-
appreciate.
We definitely do, and Marcy's Law with victims is very is something that we take very seriously at our department, besides the kids that are in these, because, you know, we want to protect them too. So, sorry, I just wanted to.
No, I appreciate that. So we are up to the next scheduled meeting. I'll just ask if there's any burning comments from our committee. Yes, Mr. Blunt?
I want to share some community announcement comments.
Okay.
Is that okay now?
Go ahead.
As if you don't have enough offered for your calendars, 3 events in May. I want to, and I have flyers for them.
Okay.
On Thursday, May 12th at 6:30 at Santa Fe High School, there'll be awards for the Racial Justice Essay Contest. And Equal Justice Initiative is furnishing some of our local kids $2,500 prizes for their academic writing. And it's going to be an interesting thing for the kids. On Saturday, May 14th, from 11 to 3 at the 4th Avenue Food Park will be a community fundraiser for relief for people in Ukraine. It's called Ukes for Ukraine. It's done by the Gainesville's Ukulele Collective. And on Saturday, May 21st at 10 a.m. in Micanopy, there will be a ceremony about the soil collection at a ritual done at historical sites of lynching. And I have flyers for all of those if anybody wants the handout. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
May 21st, Veterans for Peace Scholarship and Peace Poetry Reading.
All right.
Give out 4 $1,500 scholarships, and the poets, I'm judging them right now.
Fantastic. And I think if anybody has any, if you want to remind us closer to the dates, just use the email address because it's not public business. Yes, Inspector Kearney.
Just want to mention May 9th, 6 p.m. in the Hall of Heroes, and please spread it out to anyone in the community that would like to come. We are convening our violent crime work group as part of the One Community Initiative. It'll be our very first meeting. I do believe we have 9 people who want to be part of the committee, but it is a public meeting, so anyone is welcome to attend. And it's talking, if you want to know the purpose of it.
Oh, I just want to know what time. I didn't miss the time.
6 p.m. So at GPD in the Hall of Heroes, the intent is to have the first meeting there, but every meeting after that will be in the community at different locations, so that other members of the community can come in and be part of the solution, so.
Can you
Yes,
call
ma'am.
that the One Community Initiative?
It's actually, yes, it's part of One Community, which Chief Scott started, where we started with Who's in the Box, where we did the presentation for the juvenile youth both at the theater and at the church. This is kind of another initiative on the One Community event, but it is called the Violent Crime Work Group. So these are members of the community who are serious about fighting violent crime within our community from a different angle.
So I think your point as well, you've seen lots of Crime Watch opportunities, you're invited on a ride-along, your homework is to attend something that makes you happy, that helps you become educated, and I believe we're planning to meet next month here and on May 25th, so with that, I'll throw it out. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. I only went 30 minutes over, I tried.